Okay, so we had this is Shock Exchange. This is Trump and the GE Barbarians at the Gate for Endo, final edition, and we've discussed five companies who will be potential acquisition targets for Endo International, a company we think is highly undervalued, still trades at under 7 times EBITDA even after Friday's earnings report. I have with me, of course, Tori and Mitchell. So, in the we like before we get started, we'd like people to subscribe to the channel, like the videos, and share the videos. In the picture for the YouTube video is Nevada State AG Aaron Ford, and he is he represents one of the states, one of about 6 states that did not sign the $26 billion opiate settlement that was put forth back in June, I think it was. And so his take on the opiate settlement is that the 240 million Nevada was expected to get was woefully inefficient. Those were his exact words, and he thought he should go it alone and sue the opiate manufacturers separately. And other states felt the same way: Alabama, Georgia, West Virginia, Washington, Oklahoma, who thought that their share of the opiate settlement was not enough, and so they wanted to go it alone. And uh, there's been some changes, some significant changes since then. That Judge Peter J. Wilson out of California ruled earlier this week, that the opiate manufacturers were not liable for the opiate epidemic for various reasons. The main reasons was that he felt the plaintiffs did not prove that the opiate manufacturers caused doctors to inappropriately prescribe opiates. They didn't prove their case. This is after 4 years. We had 4 years to come up with this evidence. It's been a lot of posturing, a lot of allegations, but no proof. He said that it's well known that doctors were prescribing opiates for chronic pain, and which led to additional prescriptions, a ballooning of prescriptions. And the trade-off was that it may have led to more addiction. And there was a trade-off the people, the doctors, and the policymakers, so on and so forth, FDA, were willing to live with. So now it's hard to blame opiate manufacturers after the fact. And then he also said that, how can you prove that prescription opiates cause overdoses or overdose deaths versus drugs being sold on the black market? Because people still buying opiates and fentanyl on the black market. And he said opiates pass through a lot of hands: FDA, the manufacturers, the doctors, the distributors. So how can you pinpoint exactly who is to blame? So he felt that the opiate manufacturers were not liable. And this is consistent with previous precedents, consistent with what Judge Polster said a couple of years ago, who helped come up with this novel settlement mechanism. It's consistent with rulings coming out of North Dakota and Connecticut, and these summary judgments that it's hard to sue drug companies for selling legal drugs. And so Mr. Ford, again, he did not sign on to the $26 billion opiate settlement. So after the California ruling, someone could surmise that other states will rule the same way. And that I basically wrote an article that Mr. Ford may actually lose $240 million by not signing to the original settlement. And that was a chance people took. Either you take the settlement or risk going to court and not getting anything. And I'm not sure the market is really aware of the fact that the states that haven't signed may not get anything, which leads us back to Endo, that Endo settled, has paid out about or agreed to about settlements of $111 million with Oklahoma, certain counties in Ohio, certain counties in Tennessee, Louisiana, and also with New York State. So before Judge Wilson ruled, he indicated that he was having trouble finding what illegal activity had taken place, which kind of foreshadowed that he was going to rule against the plaintiffs. That was a month ago. And then shortly after that, guess what? The state of Louisiana and AG Jeff Landry settled with Endo and Teva out the blue. And then last Sunday night, Alabama was supposed to go to trial with Endo and McKesson Monday. Endo, I mean, excuse me, Alabama settled, and AG Steve Marshall settled with Endo Sunday night in the middle of the night, out the clear blue sky. And then they were trying to settle with McKesson. And I think they're trying to feverishly get a deal done with McKesson. But it seems to me that the leverage with the plaintiffs has clearly fallen after the California ruling. And Alabama's behavior seems to indicate that as well, because they haven't disclosed how much they settled with Endo. I've called the law firm that represented the state of Alabama. I've called no information. They sent me back to the state AG. I called the state AG's office. I haven't heard anything. The county clerk in Alabama has no information because the information is private. They know that there's been a settlement, but the amount has still been undisclosed. So it's a line of demarcation. It's a key metric, because if they Endo settled with Louisiana for $8 million, let's say they settled with Alabama for $2 million or $1 million, it could indicate that the leverage is clearly in the hands of Endo and the opiate manufacturers, Endo and Teva, and the opiate manufacturers at this point. So those who haven't settled may get a settlement that would reflect a public policy issue and not a legal issue, if that makes sense. Because the opiate epidemic, according to Teva's CEO Cash Core Schultz, is that this is a public policy issue. We're willing to help fund it, but we shouldn't be held legally liable. Given that backdrop, I think Endo's liability, opiate liability, is a lot less than what people estimate it to be at this point, given the ruling in California. That I think it would be hard pressed for judges around the country to rule otherwise, to rule against Judge Polster's advice from a couple years ago, to rule against California, to rule against North Dakota and Connecticut, and prior legal precedents. That this seems to be a narrative coming from the state AGs with no legal precedents behind it. And so, that said, Aaron Ford, he obviously read the article where I wrote that Nevada could lose $240 million. And he responded to another article I wrote about former President Obama in Virginia. So he sort of clapped back on Twitter that I'm responding to another article, but didn't respond to the fact that I thought Nevada could lose $240 million. That's where we are. I think the California ruling, I think the behavior of Louisiana and the behavior of Alabama implies that there has been no legal, that there is no liability for the opiate manufacturers, including Endo, and the settlements will reflect more of a public policy issue, not a legal issue, and the settlements will be a lot less than what people previously estimated. And I don't think the market has realized that. I don't think it's priced into the shares. And I don't think the other states, the 8 states who haven't signed, I don't think they're talking about it. I don't think they realize this. And the states that haven't signed with Teva and Endo, we talked about this a couple weeks ago, that we thought that the Louisiana settlement would lead to a cascade of settlements in Alabama, Tennessee, Mississippi, Kentucky, Missouri, Arkansas, but it hasn't happened. So they can't afford the law, and it seemed like the law won. And so we're just putting it out there that, we think Endo's and Teva's legal exposure, a lot less than what people had previously estimated, and their share prices do not reflect this. And we'll know more as soon as we get the information from Alabama. How much they settle with Endo, and how much they may eventually settle with McKesson if McKesson settles. Because McKesson may not owe them anything. McKesson may decide we don't owe you anything. Yeah. So that's the update on the legal on the legal front. The other update with Endo is that they reported earnings Thursday night. Then they had an earnings call Friday morning, and the earnings were phenomenal, just like we suspected. They blew away revenue projections and earnings projections. VasoStrict was phenomenal. Its revenue's growing like a bad weed due to more hospitalizations, which is similar to what we're seeing with Gilead and Regeneron, who have products that treat COVID-19 patients after they become hospitalized. So a lot of drug companies who have drugs that, certain drugs are rising rapidly due to hospitalizations and due to the Delta variant. And those generic business grew as well, which was unsurprising. And this doesn't include, it only include like maybe a week or two of generic Chantix. So Q4 should be even better. Q4 results should be gaudy. And Endo management team, they increased guidance, which they never do. So that was a pleasant surprise. But they did not buy back stock. And we're both, highly disappointed by that. We thought it was a fiduciary responsibility for Endo to buy back its shares. When we first looked at 10Q or the presentation
S3.
on the earnings, we saw that the the cash went up, and we expect it to go down. And I think at this point, Endo is more concerned with preserving much capital for these unknown opiate settlements that may have become more known now. Estimate may become more known now after the ruling in California. That we think that the settlements will probably be a lot less than what people estimated, and even Endo estimated. And we think that hopefully that these state AGs will be willing to come to the table, sign a global opiate settlement right now, or either drop the cases, because these seem like a bunch of pomp and circumstance and foul legal proceedings and trying to sue people for activity that was not illegal. So that's sort of my take on what's happened with Endo since we last spoke.
Yeah, I mean it's outside of the numbers for me, because I listened in on the earnings call. There's a lot of fluff though. I got to say that between Blaze, Mark, and Patrick, it was just kind of a echo chamber of fluff. The questions that were clearly curated. In my opinion, I don't have any proof that they were curated, but I just find it one weird that only 3 folks were allowed to ask questions when they opened up for the Q&A. And those 3 folks happened to be analysts, and those 3 folks said nothing, asked nothing in regards to the fact that you started off at the beginning of the year nearly $11 share price, and then goes all the way down to its lowest point of $1.93, and you asked nothing about shareholder value whatsoever. You asked nothing about the the way that shorts have continued to manipulate the stock price whatsoever. They, I believe that the earnings call is still open to listen to. So I would encourage anyone who's interested in even validating what I'm saying, go back and listen to it for yourself. Like obviously there was a huddle before the earnings call because Mark and Patrick kept echoing this turn of phrase, principal discipline, as if it meant anything. It was just a redundancy of nothing. They wouldn't give any specifics in regards to, which I think that part is understandable, that they couldn't give much. Well, let me back up for a minute. Not that they couldn't, but they wouldn't give much specifics about the case, right? That's obviously one of the things, opioid crisis and going through these cases. They wouldn't say much beyond the headlines that they had already put out after California's ruling. And in fact, they literally just verbatim repeated the actual headline, that they put out. That, California put out a tentative ruling that was in Endo's favor. Full stop. That was it. They didn't offer any insight on as to what they think the future cases are headed, which again, I do believe is a bit understandable. And they had already prefaced, Blaze has said that a few times prior to opening up the questions for Q&A, So I find it really, really strange that you have three adult folks with assuming the adult-sized human form brains. And although Blaze has said this very statement 2 or 3 times prior to opening up for Q&A, that you decide to burn your cue when it comes to your turn on questions about the case. Seemed kind of strange to me, and almost unexplainable, other than the fact that maybe there was a little bit of prep in deciding which analyst to open up the Q&A platform to. The other thing that was noticeable is that the phone number that was provided was not a well, the phone number worked, but the code in order to dial in for specifically for the Q&A didn't seem to work. So not to put on the tinfoil hat and get a little conspiratorial, but it just certainly seemed odd, right? That all of these coincidences that the call-in number, the dial-in number didn't seem to work. So you were largely relegated to listening to the webcast, which also did not give you an option to chime in for Q&A. Maybe that's a coincidence as well. The only 3 people that got to ask questions, so much so that they circled back to one of the 3 people. It was a young woman, and I forget these analysts' names. So I forget the names, but they circled back to one of the young ladies. So she got to ask. She got to repeat the question just in a different way that she asked the first time. And each of the questions came down to either cases, opioid cases, came down to Chantix, which they were also limited in what they were willing to say, especially when it came to Mark and Patrick, one which is the COO and the other the CFO, and then Quo, and specifically the ad spins on Quo. So for me, it was 45 minutes of a lot of fluff. There were probably about 3 solid minutes out of that total earnings call where it gave actual information that would give some insight as to just kind of the forward-looking view of the company. And as I've stated before, the company has done a phenomenal job turning this company around from where it was even 4 years ago. However, when it specifically comes to shareholder value, this was a piss poor performance, an absolutely piss poor performance. And Blaze, as a CEO, has to be held accountable for that. And for me, the earnings call was indicative of the lack of acknowledgement to shareholder value, the lack of acknowledgement to shareholders. To have shares drop 90% in less than a year, when the company has only gotten stronger, and each quarter we never get to hear any concern about that, any addressing, even just the smallest acknowledgement that this is something that's important to the board. This is something that's important to management. It's unacceptable. I don't, I could definitely use some other colorful language to describe it, but but all in all, it's unacceptable that as the leader of a company, and you're using shareholder value to move the company forward in the best possible way that you think it should be moved, then you must address the shareholders, and not just simply in this very myopic way, kind of peppering the the conversation is to say, well, we won't talk about this, we won't talk about that, we won't talk about this. So you can only ask us anything that's within this small slice of lane. In other words, so you're kind of left with a significant amount of redundancies.
Right. They're
So yeah,
stewards
I
of
guess that's my
they're effectively stewards of shareholder capital, but they're acting like it's their own personal lemonade stand.
That's pretty much it. That's pretty much it. As if, this is their money alone, and that they're, it's just kind of a free fall, right? That they'll do what they see as best without including the actual equity partners, which are the shareholders of the company. That's the other side of being a publicly traded company, right? Like whether you like it or you don't like it, shareholder value has to be acknowledged. It has to be implemented within any sort of company plan moving forward. Even in the midst of doing the right things. And again, I still stand firm by that they have done the right things in terms of, getting this company to really turn things around. They reduced their exposure to generics. They significantly invested into Quo and other trials and studies, and obviously continuing, because in order to put out, and I think, and if I remember correctly, it was either Blaze or Mark that stated they can expect another 10 treatments to come out by Q4. So just within the next 3 months, we can expect a new pipeline, which is great. But again, when we look at the performance, right, of the share price. And so I think anyone that has followed Endo, certainly if you've tuned into us at any point in time, there was an expectation, and a strong expectation, which we've laid out several times, just from Quo, generic Chantix. Mesh payments have significantly reduced. They're nearly done with mesh payments. They've also reduced their debt exposure. So Vasostrict as well. So in other words, there was a clear expectation that earnings was going to beat, revenue was going to beat, EPS was going to beat. Across the board, they did that. And unless they reported earnings of $100 billion, I'm not sure how much better it could have gotten. And although this beat hands down, yet share price, it went from what? It dipped a bit in the morning, low of I think a little close to 5. I don't think it quite touched 5, maybe a couple cents above 5, all the way up to a whopping 687.
Right.
Woo! Like if you were the unfortunate ones that have been, bought in at 9, at 8, at 7. I'm sure there were a couple of folks waiting with a bated breath. And maybe you get back to break even. It got to that 687. And then what did it do? Shorts were able to step in and do what they do best. And they brought it down $1 in less than 2 minutes. It took 3 hours for it to go from $5 to 687, and it took 3 minutes for it to go from this high all the way down into the 520s. It's funny and it's not funny.
That was what I was about to say.
Because it just goes to show that this is what will continue to happen. In other words, now all you have done, because you failed to acknowledge shareholder value, especially in an earnings call, especially during a quarter that was a blowout quarter, right? You have significant cachet here to, get the existing shareholders triple bought in and new, kind of new blood coming in and say, hey, here's one of the most undervalued companies on the market. I dare you to find one with more growth potential and such an undervalued stock price. You'd be hard pressed to. So this was a time. It's like, you had the California ruling, you got blowout earnings, you have shorts manipulating this thing left, right, and center, and most of all, you had $1.7 billion in unrestricted cash, a little over 400 million of which came just from one quarter alone. And instead of investing that into shareholder value by way of buybacks, you simply sat on it. Just simply sat on it. And the thing that that Blaze did bring up during one of the questions, which is where I thought the question was headed. I thought, oh, finally one of the analysts kind of get their heads out of their butts and start to focus on the cash. Like, okay, what are you going to do with all of this cash? Right. It didn't quite go there. he was almost there. It just took a left, took a left with the question, but Blaze did answer and give a little bit of insight and stated that they're going to focus on internal assets first before looking outside of the company. So I guess maybe that was a bit of a dog whistle, that they are going to potentially look at shareholder value. But looking at the past, 18 months, to me, it simply says we're either looking at acquisitions, looking at bolstering up marketing campaigns for Quo and Xiaflex. That's really the majority of where the conversation sat. In other words, is they were super excited about Peyronie's disease having its first commercial, which is great, but it's like, okay, like, all right, great, get in line.
But that, you don't think that could connote buybacks at some point, right?
But that's my point. Like, what in terms of
it's open ended. It's open ended.
Right, it's very open ended because look at all of the heavy lifting that they've had to do just in the last 2 years alone, right? All of this heavy lifting, they have now made it through breakthrough litigation, never before. And I think you've even said it on the show. You certainly said it offline several times that California is going to go no liability. You said that, like, verbatim. And I was like, nah. I was hopeful, but I was like, nah, I don't think a California judge would be so brazen. And here we are living in that time. It's like, holy crap. And the reason, my justification for my doubt was because of the impact for future precedent. When a judge from whatever state says or does one thing, it sets a tone for other jurisdictions. And they're going to be looking at what this judge has said. So because of that, I didn't expect the judge to just come right out and say, like, nah, yeah, there's no liability here. They didn't fail in their marketing. They didn't fail in their language. They didn't, essentially that's the reason why there is no liability that the tentative ruling put out.
But what you said is important in terms of future precedents because you have to look at alcohol companies, you have to look at gun manufacturers. If you allow a public nuisance claim for these opiate manufacturers for selling illegal drugs, then it opens up a can of worms for gun manufacturers and alcohol companies. Who's to say that Jack Daniels can't be sued because they sold too much alcohol on 4th of July? And they've been told, and the people have been told right. over and over and over again, you can't sue gun manufacturers for public nuisance.
And this is
there has to be some type of personal responsibility somewhere. Even more so that it's even I think even more of a hurdle for opiate manufacturers because it has to be these drugs have to be approved by the FDA. They're tracked by the FDA. They have to be prescribed by a doctor.
Right.
And have to be distributed by somebody. So it takes a lot more regulations to sell opiates than it is to sell guns or I think to sell guns or alcohol.
Right. And if we are still a nation of laws, then this was not an insignificant event. This is a huge, huge, huge deal with huge implications for the remaining states that did not join the global settlement. So that was where my hesitation to jump on board with your view that California is going to go this way. So I'm pleasantly surprised. But in other words, that has taken a lot, right? That's been 4 years, close to 4 years of litigation
Right.
that Endo has had to go through, and to still get the company to this point. They've already made a smart acquisition with Biophysicists,
Biospecifics.
Biospecifics, and as well as investing more into Quo, investing into the case studies, etc. I don't think in terms of turning a company around that arguably that you will find a better path, right? That they've kind of done the right things, and in doing all the right things is still sitting, at under $7 a share.
Right.
Like it's still one of the most
still trading under two times earnings.
Right, yeah, right. Like they still, even with this new market cap, they still have more cash on hand than the entire market cap of the company. So this is what I mean that when it comes to shareholder value, I don't want to hear another 12 months or 24 months of acquisitions and ad spends and just more of the same thing that has led to this point. Like, do I have to wait another decade, in other words, before we see $10 again?
Okay,
Are
but
you going like when are you know what I mean? Like when is it going to be time for shareholders to be rewarded for continuing to buy into the company's growth?
okay, but to the company to defend the company a little bit. Let's say 6 months ago, someone said that CAG said we'll let you settle for half of what Mallinckrodt settled for. Mallinckrodt settled for I think 1.6 billion.
Right.
The Endo settled for $800 million. I would taking that. So you got to take this deal. And so
Right.
Endo fought and waited, delayed until they got the California ruling. Now they may end up selling for $200 million.
Right. Right. No, it's
as a value added $600 million pre-tax. Okay.
Sure, but how do shareholders take it?
Right, exactly. I think that's how Endo's looking at it. Our value added is that we've saved the company because we've skillfully navigated this litigation, and we've had our legal counsel help us determine that, to stick to our guns, that this is a public policy issue, not a legal issue. They weren't attached to the $26 billion opiate settlement, and now they read the California ruling, and they could potentially settle for hundreds of $millions less than what they would have otherwise. Now it's a matter of us getting the information out there and letting people know that that their potential exposure is a lot less than what people had previously estimated. And then once, right now, I think they're really focused on adding value in terms of getting these claims settled and bringing the other side to the table, which has not been easy. It's like herding cats. I think the California ruling will help. I think there's a lot of demarcation after the California ruling, before the California ruling, and after the California ruling. And once the market realizes that what we're talking about now, I think the stock price should reflect that. It also should open up a pathway for Endo to actually start using some of that cash hoard to buy back shares. I thought I was going to wake up a rich man Friday. Obviously, I'm not because I'm still wearing this black shirt. I'm in my Johnny Cash mode. See a train a coming. I'm in my Johnny Cash mode. I not in a good mood at all, and I thought I could wake up a very rich man, and I thought I could be smoking a cigar right now on this Trump and the GE. So we'll be doing this show down in Cuba. I am not happy about it, but I'm trying to stay composed. But I agree with you as far. We talked about the share buybacks. They have a fiduciary responsibility to buy back shares. It would have, if they bought 50 million, 60 million shares, it would have cost Endo less than 10% of its unrestricted cash. I'm not sure how it would affect the negotiations for the opiate settlement. But then again, we didn't have the California ruling.
Exactly.
Line. So I think a line of demarcation. I think it's before California and after California. I think that's been shown by the actions of Louisiana and Alabama. And Louisiana didn't just wake up one day and say, let's settle with Endo and Teva.
Right. Well, I mean, I think that's a kind of a perfect segue into number 3. We've decided to kind of break with tradition. Here we've been doing our Barbarians one by one, but we've decided to wrap them up and do the remaining 3 Barbarians all in one. And I believe our third Barbarian, which is a little bit outside of the box, but I think to our listeners that it will make some sense, right? And our third Barbarian is not a biopharma company at all. It is, and there's no way for us to mask, so we're just going to call it out, which is Amazon. And yes, that Amazon, right? And the reason that chose Amazon, say, wait, why would that make sense? And why is it the perfect segue? And I think it's the perfect segue because one, this litigation does have not only a silver lining, but kind of the proverbial light at the end of the tunnel, right? So it's becoming clearer and clearer what the cost of litigation is going to be and where it can potentially go. So it gives more of a concrete feel to a company's M&A team to be able to put some very realistic numbers and even a realistic kind of ceiling, like what's the worst case scenario here, right? That if we're completely wrong about where this litigation goes and there's a surprise ruling and Endo has to pay out more than what we kind of our best case scenario is, then it's still going to have a cap, right? It's still going to have a ceiling. And obviously, like we just gave the comparison with Mallinckrodt of 1.6 billion. Clearly, Endo, kind of worst case scenario, wouldn't be looking at anywhere close to 1.6 billion. I would argue to say even half is on the high end as well. So why Amazon? One, simply because one, after listening to Friday's earnings call, this was confirmation of something that I've said behind the scenes several times. Going to be the first time, I guess, in front of the camera. That, when it comes to shareholder value, that the current management team is really sheep in wolves clothing. Like, let's call it what it is. They're pushovers. Blaze, Patrick, Mark, and the rest of them. They are focused on the company, rightfully so, but neglecting shareholders at the same time. So this gives Andy Jassy, who is the new CEO ever since Bezos stepped down this summer, they've already shown a significant amount of interest in disrupting the pharmaceutical business. So you're looking at a 312 billion market, right? And they went toe to toe with their largest competitor, Walmart, and beat Walmart, which I think was expected when it came to the acquisition of PillPack. PillPack was a discounted, discounted pharmacy, and just simply use an app, use technology to distribute coupons like manufacturer coupons, discounts, etc., to help lower some of the cost of existing drugs, which is an area that allows non-traditional, non-biopharma companies to be able to step into and sort of disrupt, because the U.S. is literally the only country on planet Earth that pays for healthcare services and medications at the rates and prices, even on a per capita basis, that we do. So that presents a unique opportunity for other capitalists to be able to disrupt that existing model, right? Well, taking over an actual biopharma company for Amazon, to me, this would be, because anytime I think from like Andy Jesse's perspective, right? Although he's been with the company since early days, since '97. So he's been with the company almost 25 years, right? However, anytime that the face of the company steps down, right, it's always hard to build your own reputation, right? It's just like when Jordan left and then Pippen had to step up. No one mistook Pippen for Jordan, right? Like same way when Jobs got ousted, John Scully had to step in. Same way that Tim Cook has had to step in. The same way, I'm going to mess up Pendahara's name over at Alphabet, as well as with Microsoft. So in other words, when the face of a company steps down and then this new face comes, it's always the comparisons, right? It's like, so you got to do something, right? You got to do a thing that's going to separate you from the Michael Jordan of the company, right? And to me, this would be a great way for Andy Jassy to be able to deliver in an area that Amazon is already heavily invested in. They're tripling down into the pharmaceutical space, and completely they can, Amazon can literally cut a check today without even noticing that a check was cut, to completely buy out Endo. And I'm quite sure that even with a premium, that it would be an amount that when presented to the remaining shareholders, that it would be a compelling vote. Because when we look at the past 24 months, this company has done phenomenally well in terms of earnings. They continue to be earnings. They continue to put out groundbreaking products. However, in terms of shareholder value has continued to deteriorate. It continues to be manipulated, and it continues to go disregarded. So this gives Amazon a kind of a perfect storm, right? In other words, to acknowledge shareholder value by coming in and taking advantage of a company and frankly exploiting its share price. The fact that you got sheep sitting at the helm and not concerned about shareholder value. So there's nothing to engender our loyalty to vote against an Amazon, in other words. So let's be very clear that that's the other threat, that when you disregard shareholder value, you have nothing to say about shareholders, that external threats can be thwarted off, such as acquisitions, by any other competitor, can be thwarted off by those same shareholders. You can say, even if it's $100 a share, we think this management team is the team to lead us into the future. We don't care if it's $100 a share. We're voting no against the acquisition. But when it's a team that continues to disregard, continues to remain silent, continues to not defend the company's share price in any way, shape, or form, it opens yourself up. You have a wide, you got a wide kind of lane for a competitor to step in. And I think the benefit for Amazon to be able to come in and scoop up a company that arguably is one of the best managed companies, has again 17 to 20 products coming out in the next 12 to 14 months, 10 which, according to Blaze, the CEO of Endo, is set to come out by Q4. So a little over half of those, half of that 17 to 20 is looking to come out just in the remaining quarter. So aggressive product pipeline growth and focus. If I'm an Andy Jesse, I'm certainly charging my M&A team to put offers together, because this management team is great at keeping focus on the actual product pipeline, but it certainly needs better leadership in terms of shareholder value. And arguably, Amazon was set to be the first $1 trillion company. They were going toe to toe with Apple and Microsoft. So what company is better, right, at acknowledging shareholder value than Amazon, in other words, right? So I think that that it could be a pretty easy sell for shareholders, and I think shareholders will welcome an Amazon acquisition, and welcome really shareholder value what it can look like, right? Rightfully so. I stand on my square 110% that if any company should be trading at $400 or $500 a share, it should be Endo. This is let me be very clear. This is where Endo should be trading. This is the type of value that this company really has. And yet it continues to sit on the sidelines, simply because it does not have the leadership at the helm that is required in order to bring it into that type of valuation. There's no way in hell that a Moderna should be sitting anywhere close to $500 a share simply off of a pandemic contract. 2 years ago, Moderna had 6 employees. They barely had the ink dry on the incorporation papers, with absolutely no pipeline. And yet enough institutional capital got behind it, really drove this share price up to, didn't quite touch 500, but got close to it, right? In the 480s, I believe, on its highest end, maybe even 493, something like that. But point is that there's no way that Moderna should have been able to surpass an Endo in terms of shareholder value, simply off of one government contract. Endo should already be there in spite of the opioids, in spite of the litigation that has been going on as well.
Okay. So Amazon is already distributing branded drugs and generics at steep discounts. So,
Yep.
and Endo is one of the biggest. It's not as big as Teva or Viatris, of course, but it is one of the biggest. It's a major player in the generic space, so it can develop generic drugs. So it seems to be a natural fit with Amazon. And could you imagine if Endo was allowed to sell Quo or market Quo to Amazon's 200 million Prime members? And we know that Endo has the opportunity to be a category killer with Quo, and we know that they probably want to grow in the aesthetic space. So I think it could be. I think an acquiree would be attracted to being acquired by Endo because of the operating environment and the visions and the management and its ability to operate a business and to grow a business. But the ability is to market Quo and future aesthetics products to Amazon's 200 million Prime members. It's almost unquantifiable. So the grow is branded. Is take his branded machine, his ability to develop branded drugs and market it to Amazon's customer base. It's I wouldn't say proprietary customer base, but it's sort of captive customer base would be phenomenal.
Right.
Be a match made in heaven. Then the fact that adding to the fact that Endo's highly undervalued. 7 times EBITDA is it's almost criminal. And we've talked about this in the past that is the low valuation could potentially open itself up to an acquisition or an activist investor. So it only makes sense that Amazon would not only take a look at Endo, but to acquire it or at least buy a majority stake, and then once the opiate overhang subsides, then buy the entire company. So it's really a no-brainer that Amazon wants to grow in the generic space, in the branded drug space. Endo has the expertise. It has the R&D capability and the management team to do it. So, and stock is highly undervalued. And then the aesthetic space is going to expect it to grow phenomenally. And Endo's in that space right now. And they've proven the ability to develop drugs in that space and to win in that market. And think Quo could be again, it could be potentially has a potential to be revolutionary in terms of the fact that so many women have cellulite, and the fact that Quo could be a non-surgical option for the treatment of cellulite.
Yeah, and another quick point before moving on to Barbarian number 2 as well is that specifically with the aesthetics, the question was brought up, and Endo, I believe it was either Patrick or Blaze himself that refused to even state the size of the market. Give it a number, right? What's the kind of the total universe of the market that they're looking at, and they refuse to even give to give that number, which we're I think at least for long time investors of Endo, we're used to that type of posturing with Endo kind of playing the cool kids, right? They're playing the background. They're too cool for school attitudes. But at the end of the day, the market size, because Amazon is such a significantly large company that it has to nearly take over spaces in order to justify its existence at this point. And Amazon is in a unique space specifically to easily swallow 70-80% of the aesthetic space, especially when you connect the dots with AWS. AWS is one of the few profitable pieces of Amazon for a long time. Investors of Amazon, that's the biggest gripe with investors, especially from 10 years ago. You're watching Amazon continue to invest in these kind of projects, right, and new products and rollouts, and none of these things were profitable. The only profitable division for a long time was AWS. For folks that aren't familiar, this is the business intelligence division of Amazon. This is their servers. This is the data center. This is, what is known as the cloud, right? And when we look at small mom and pop shops, that also includes clinics and aesthetic clinics where Botox and other aesthetic treatments, body sculpting, which are essentially going to be side by side with Quo. I wouldn't necessarily call them kind of direct competitors, but they are competitors in some sense. So in other words, these same family offices, clinics, aesthetic clinics, guess what they use for their records? AWS. So when we talk about the amount of aggregate data that Amazon has on nearly every small business in the country. There is no better business that is positioned to be able to do such a mass rollout with highly curated and nuanced information that's going to attract clinics, that's going to attract folks that exist within that market, as obviously women are the biggest target of that market. But it's not enough to just say, well, women, right? All women. Right? You want different subsects. In other words, like, is it 40-year-old women with 2 children, married, bachelor's degrees? Start digging into those nuances. In other words, of every sort of sector. There's no other company that's better positioned than Amazon, because they already have that consumer data on buying patterns. And companies are no different than individuals in terms of said buying patterns and what's going to be attractive and what's going to be such an easy integration. In other words, finding a route of delivery to get quote into the hands of consumers, as well as the businesses that are going to need to perform the injections for the end users or clients. So in other words, the rollout can be very seamless and built on highly curated data that already exists within Amazon's framework. So I just wanted to point that out, that because of that, that is the piece that if I'm Amazon's M&A team, it becomes kind of a perfect marriage, right? That even if you throw out vasostrict and generic Chantix and everything else that Endo has, and simply take Quo, Quo alone would be a huge enough product to really build Amazon's kind of entry into the biopharma space on, but doing it while really treating within the aesthetic space. And as we've stated before, aesthetics is largely unregulated when it comes to pricing. So, whatever the initial pricing that Endo had for, Quo, it can either continue, and Amazon is so large as well that it can also be a loss leader, right? That they could even take an approach where they discount in order to get new folks coming in and drawing the crowds in, and offering it at a discount where it becomes a loss leader for the first 12 months. And before increasing the price, simply to get the masses of people in and to get the data that's needed to continue to curate the information and the routes of delivery for their clients. So in other words, there are significant ways that they can do this, including even bumping up the price, which is the last way, right? To keep the price the same, lower it, or raise it. But in other words, Amazon has the data, they have the customer base, they have the technology to be able to disrupt just off of Quo alone. Obviously, if they're Amazon's M&A team, they're looking at Endo. I don't think that they would strip it just for Quo, because generic Chantix is going to be huge. It's going to allow Amazon to completely disrupt the smoking cessation market. Vasostrict, it allows them to just completely swoop in and have an entire biopharma division. And like I said, this could certainly be Andy Jesse's legacy here. This could be his moment, right, to be able to differentiate himself from Bezos, right? Let's say, well, Bezos brought in AWS, but I brought in a $312 billion market. I brought in biopharma, and that would be his legacy and contribution to Amazon and their shareholders.
Okay. Okay, so I have nothing else on Amazon. I mean,
Oh, well, yeah. I guess we can move on to Barbarian number two. Which,
sure. I mean, Barbarian number two is Eli Lilly, and we thought it'd be a good fit because it does have it does fit in sort of the dermatology space. It has a psoriasis business called Taltz, and in Q3 it generated about the total company generated about 6.8 billion in product sales, up 18% versus Q3 2020. Um, Trulicity grew 45%. The second biggest treatment, Humalog, actually fell 5%. But um, Eli Lilly it treats diabetes. It also has insulin. It's also been criticized for hiking the prices for insulin. So if you need insulin, I mean, it's a tough pill to swallow because the prices just never drop. And so it's been highly criticized for exploiting the price hikes for insulin. Again, it also has a big diabetes drug that treats type 2 diabetes and Trulicity, and its revenue grew 45% year over year. I'm trying to figure out if that's based on demand or just maybe a demand and price hikes. But Eli Lilly has been assumed to be vulnerable for years due to its reliance on insulin treatment, and so um, it grew revenue by double digits in Q3 2021, but that may have been the fact that compared to last year, it was coming out of in the midst of a pandemic, so that may have been uh, that may have contributed to a lot of the growth. But it does have Taltz, which treats psoriasis, and Taltz generated revenue of $593 million and grew 30% year over year. And we talked about Barbarian number four, which also treats psoriasis. And it's both the psoriasis drugs were growing double digits year over year, and that's taking market share out of somebody's hide.
yeah.
That means the psoriasis business is a very tough business where you have new products coming online and new ways to these biologics that are new ways to attack psoriasis and treat psoriasis. And it's a very tough business, very competitive business, and there's continued more treatments coming to the space. And the fact that Eli Lilly's Taltz grew by double digits is phenomenal. We think Endo's aesthetics business, what we call Quo and Xiaflex, could fit into Eli Lilly's dermatology space. And so again, because of the expertise in dermatology, their presence in dermatology, and the fact they have so much capital and they need to continue to find ways to grow revenue, and the fact that Endo is almost begging to be bought, it's almost saying, "Please buy me, somebody." Because we talked about this before, that Endo has a fiduciary responsibility to buy back its shares, or it's vulnerable, and Eli Lilly would be a great candidate, or anybody else who has psoriasis business or dermatology business would be a candidate to buy the company because it fits into the dermatology space, and its Taltz is doing phenomenal, and I've always had Eli Lilly has always had a image of being very dependent on insulin and price hikes. So the fact that it could actually grow revenue and grow earnings outside of price hikes would be a good help to the company long term in its business prospects. So that's why we think Lilly would be a fit to. Endo would be a fit for Eli Lilly.
Yeah, I mean it's I think just kind of size putting them in the number two position, but it's pretty much the same logic that the remaining five Barbarians, right? That a lot of them have exposure to price hikes, just the sentiment that is happening socially, and rightfully so, because as I've stated several times, that just between 2015 to 2019, healthcare costs have risen over 54%. So in terms of wallet share for households, healthcare continues to eat into the spend. In other words, that's what wallet share is. How much money do I have to spend on this particular item in order to live, right? So whether that be rent, mortgage, food, clothes, insurance, gas, etc., healthcare has increased its positionality by 54% just in the 4 years between 2015 and 2019. And it doesn't look like it's slowing down. In other words, in terms of costs, and now we have to throw in the inflation because of the Fed has finally decided to do the thing that they were supposed to do about a decade ago, which is NQE, but they decided, hey, let's do a 13-year run, then take it away after inflation rises, so that we can cause it to rise some more. So we can expect a continuation of price hikes. Healthcare is going to be no different. So we can expect continued outcries. In other words, socially, as a rebuttal to increase price hikes. We do have some congressional members that are looking to push back by way of reducing exposure and even get policy that makes it or deems it predatory for certain price hikes of certain sizes, especially for medications that, like insulin, like EpiPens, etc., that are heavily used by the public and really, and frankly, should be at a low to very minimal cost because so many people are dependent on these life-saving drugs. So Eli Lilly has that same exposure. They were specifically named in that 42-page congressional report that I mentioned, I think a couple episodes ago. So for that reason alone, just like the others, they have to find new ways for revenue other than price hikes, right? You can only keep increasing a price so much before you price yourself out of the market completely, and then open yourself up for competition to eat your food at the end of the day. So, Eli Lilly is faced with that same issue, but unlike Barbarian number one, they don't necessarily have the insight, and that's why I think we chose Barbarian number one that they have, which is Pfizer. Pfizer Pharmaceuticals. I think at this point, Pfizer is a household name. Most folks are familiar with it. One of the primary reasons that I like Pfizer is because of what the CEO has said. CEO has said just in the last few weeks that he doesn't believe that the COVID opportunity is going to remain an opportunity, right? Because COVID should be over within the next year or so. So they have to prepare for that. So in other words, for Moderna, Novavax, Pfizer, kind of the party is wrapping up, right? It's the last call, right? Right. As some folks may have noticed that Pfizer specifically got approved for children as early as 5, I believe, ages 5 to 12. Has been approved. Moderna, I believe, was approved as well for the vaccine. And then Pfizer has an 89% efficacy rate for their pill. No, it starts with a P. I'm going to chop up the name, but they have a COVID pill. And so, in other words, this truly is the last call because they're holding on, right? The only population left, right, is ages 0 to 4 that can't get the COVID vaccine.
But it was almost a miracle. Like it's almost a miracle.
Right.
Have a COVID pill, and then a couple weeks we had one too. Like wow.
Right. Like the FDA
makes you wonder if you had it all along.
Right. Like we won't talk about how quickly the FDA did a complete 180. It wasn't even 2 months ago when the FDA was like, nah, fam, this ain't it. This ain't like this information is inconclusive. We're not giving you approval. You don't have enough data. And then, I don't know, maybe, a janitor had in their cleaning had uncovered, like, oh, what's this box? Like, maybe I need to run this box to the CEO. And then they uncovered the box.
Right.
And just like It's a Wonderful Life, they rewarded the janitor. It's like, oh my God, you saved the company. You saved.
Right. The same janitor discovered they had a vaccine after the election, right?
Right.
Before the presidential election, there was no treatment for COVID-19. 2 weeks after Trump loses, we have the vaccine. Then it has to be stored at 94 degrees below Fahrenheit. So Moderna come to the market. Oh, we changed our mind. No, we don't.
Yeah, exactly, right.
Pfizer
finally got the approval that they needed because they pulled out the magical data.
We have appeal too.
That the FDA was looking for. So, and the fact that now, an adjustable pill for those with that I believe have COVID exposure or high risk. So it's not too many bodies left, right? Like there's not too many populations that you can continue to cover for COVID, either through prevention or treatment. This is kind of last call. So Pfizer, in other words, is clearly self-aware that, hey, we got to get back to the normal course of business. And the normal course of business, which is kind of some slow growth, just kind of trucking along. Before COVID, Pfizer is largely kind of flat, right? They're almost like a utility stock, almost like a defense stock. Doesn't really go up too much, doesn't really go down too much. I mean, it sat between like 32 and like 34 for how long, with very little movement in either direction, right? So they're just, they're what you call a blue chip, right? Just kind of slow and steady, and they've probably experienced the least amount of growth when it comes to stock price. Even BioNTech, which is who they bought the COVID vaccine from, which Pfizer bought the COVID vaccine from. BioNTech, went from I believe like $15-16 a share to $160 a share. Moderna went from being in the teens, which was already arguably overvalued, even in the teens, to touching nearly $500. I don't care what anybody says. Fight me. I don't care. Moderna is grossly overvalued. Even the CEO pretty much came out and acknowledged that, hence why they were selling. Novavax, same thing, looking just jumped right into the mid hundreds. So arguably Pfizer, compared to their COVID cohorts, has had the least amount of impact to their share price. And if it took a global pandemic to move it into the 40s, what can you expect for the next 5 years? In other words, to really get this thing to grow, right? So you have to find ways, which, most CEOs do acknowledge shareholder value, go figure. And this CEO, Albert, is no different, that he's recognizing, hey, we're going to have to start thinking about the very near future. We're going to have to do something about it. And that thing that can be done is acquisition, right? And this puts Endo in a prime target, acquisition target position for Pfizer because of that, because the CEO is already making announcements that they are going to be looking beyond COVID. So to me, in order for him to unprovoked, just simply make said announcement. To me, it says that they already have been looking at this. They already have some game plan rolled out. They already are building up their war chest in order to start making future acquisitions. And frankly, as you said before, and I will join in to say that if Pfizer misses the opportunity to scoop up Endo on the cheap, simply because it was never put as an option on the table for the board to be able to go to a vote, on management to even make a decision, M&A team needs to be fired. Like, just put right out on their butts that you missed in your own space, in your own biopharma space. You missed one of the most undervalued companies that has a significant weak point, which is shareholder value. So if you're M&A, if you're Amazon's Pfizer's M&A team, and you missed this opportunity, you need to start looking for a new job.
Right. And I think the vaccine sales, which have been phenomenal, have masked just how slowly Pfizer was growing. It was basically a dividend yield stock. You buy it for the dividend yield. It spun off Upjohn. It had a segment that had of drugs that had come off of exclusivity, and they were receiving generic competition. So they spun off when they merged Upjohn with Mylan to create Viatris. So they still have a stake in that merged entity. So that was their big idea, to jumpstart growth, not to grow, but to spin off the slow growing business. And then all you have is left the businesses that not the business that's not dragging the company down. So spun off the slow growing business in Upjohn and kept the other segments that were showing decent growth. And they still have a big R&D machine. They have a presence in oncology, internal medicine, immunology, rare diseases. But we know that they tried to buy Allergan years ago during the Obama administration, and they tried a tax inversion deal that was nixed by the Obama administration. So we know they want to be in the aesthetic space. They were trying to buy Allergan because of Botox. And
exactly.
We know they want to be in the aesthetic space. They can say whatever they want. We know you're looking at Endo.
Exactly.
We know you want to be in the aesthetic space, and we know that that Quo could be the next Botox.
Exactly.
And cellulite is almost a needs base. Treating cellulite is almost a needs base. It's not just aesthetics; it's almost a needs base treatment, because it affects more women than Botox does, or I guess wrinkles do. But the market size, the potential market, is much bigger, I think, than Botox, and so Quo could be the next Botox. And so if Pfizer wanted to buy Botox, and as a segue into the aesthetic space, they want to buy Endo.
Right, and it's been
they've talked about it. If it's not on their list, because Quo has already been launched, and Endo has the R&D prowess to grow in the aesthetic space, and they go make acquisitions in the aesthetic space. And so we know if they wanted Botox, they definitely want Quo.
100%. There's no doubt in my mind that if you could turn back in the hands of time and be able to get Botox before it became Botox, or in the iteration becoming Botox, and not just the late stage, because remember when they tried to buy Allergan, Botox had already like by the time Pfizer was looking to buy Botox had already been around in its current iteration for at least 15 years. So at that point, you're simply trying to buy a revenue stream. Let's be very clear. You're looking at a trend. You see this trend had no signs of slowing down. And years later, even during the course of a pandemic, Botox sales went largely unaffected. They largely didn't slow down. Beauty as a whole, which we've stated here several times, that beauty has been a long-standing and almost seem inelastic
Right.
in terms of its impact from the pandemic. Makeup sales went up. Beauty sales went up after the
After the
pandemic.
pandemic. Right.
It was a boom for those in the beauty and the aesthetic space. So Pfizer is very aware that phenomenon has happened. They're very aware of Quo. And I think that they do make some move in the very near future, irregardless of the litigation, the outstanding litigation.
Right.
As we've stated before, that one, if you were already kind of gunning for Endo anytime within the last 12 months, but the thing that was holding you off because you didn't think your board would allow it. Maybe you as a CEO or a COO just didn't think we had the votes because there's too much risk there. And the numbers could vary just too greatly in terms of what is this cost of litigation and the potential fallout, right? So if that was the thinking, which no one would blame, a management team to take such precaution, right? That's why you're there to analyze risk. And you found yourself in that position in the last 12 months. Well, at this point, especially after California's ruling, I am willing to bet huge that now the clock is ticking because M&A teams, management teams are getting ready to start wetting their chops, pulling out the analysis on Endo, have already looked at these spaces that we've continued to talk about in terms of value and where the future for these spaces are going to hold. I think Pfizer is definitely has Endo in its top three. I think that for acquisitions to happen within the next 12 months. And I think that they would, you would be hard pressed to lose that battle, right? I'm sure that, and if I had a bet, there's actually one of our bottom, I want to say, I think it was Barbarian number 6, that for me, I see Barbarian number 6, Amazon, and Pfizer as kind of going at it neck to neck, right? And Amazon doesn't lose too much. They've already taken down Walmart in terms of getting PillPack, and Amazon, they're not afraid of being the Gilead, right? They're not afraid of taking the Gilead Sciences playbook of buying loss leaders, and certainly buying companies at overvalued prices, and because they're looking at it over a 20-year footprint to make up for what would seem like an immediate loss through acquisition. So Amazon has one of the biggest war chests. So if I'm Pfizer, I'm already putting together an acquisition yesterday. In other words, so I can see these three just kind of going neck and neck, kind of going at it. So I'm interested to see, who's going to get there first. Who's going to? Because I think whoever kind of gets there first has a great chance of scooping Endo up, because there's not going to be too much standing in the way of getting shareholders the right price, even if that means that we got to move a couple of the folks on the management team off the team. So that's what votes are for. That's what that's a wonderful thing about being a voting shareholder is that, and for the right price, I'm sure that enough shareholders have no problem moving moving folks out of the way that is looking to stand in their way of getting shareholder value returned to them by way of acquisition.
Okay, I think Pfizer is going to be in two positions: either a buyer of Endo or someone who has a lot of explaining to do why they didn't approach Endo, because we know that they want to be in the aesthetic space. So how many
Yep.
opportunities are there? Does it have to be in the aesthetic space with a company that has a major presence in the aesthetic space that could disrupt the aesthetic space that you can buy at a reasonable price, not just a reasonable price, but for cents on the dollar because the trade's so the valuation is so low because it's been manipulated by short sellers. So their M&A team is going to have a lot of explaining to do, in my opinion, if they don't buy Endo and let somebody else come in first. But that's Trump and the GE. Barbarians at the gate for Endo. So we've gone over eight potential buys for Endo. The last three are good ones, of course. We left the best for last in Pfizer. As far as Aaron Ford from Nevada, don't sneak diss me on Twitter. If you want to engage me, you're welcome to come onto the show. We can talk about opiates. We can talk about your legal strategy for the opiate litigation. If or when you're going to drop these fake lawsuits, because you've been told 4 times already. You've been told by Judge Polster. You've been told by judge in North Dakota, judge in Connecticut, and now judge in California. And these fake lawsuits do have a cost. I know you're getting publicity for yourself. We know other state AGs have gotten publicity and try to use opiate litigation as a springboard to run for other offices. But these opiate litigation, these fake lawsuits, have a cost, and it's costing shareholders dearly. I don't like losing money, to be honest with you. And so I'm curious when you're going to stop these fake lawsuits, because you've been told 4 times already.
I would certainly, I would love to have AG Ford. It would be great to have his insight, have his perspective, even if we disagree on certain points. But it would be great to, I guess, get a little bit of kind of a sneak peek into, I guess, the thinking, right? Some of the thinking, because Aaron Ford was a part of kind of the Letitia James crew, right? That said, okay, we're not going to participate in the global settlement. We're going to take our chances, share resources, and take this head on, because we think that the affected within our state's communities can do better and deserve more. So I think in some ways it may come from a kind of an altruistic place. I certainly leave that room there. That some folks do run for office because they do want to see their communities change, right? They want to affect some sort of change that they don't believe that they are seeing. I don't know if AG Ford is one of those folks, but maybe a small part. But essentially, I leave that lane open to at least hear some of those thoughts, some of that thinking, and what has the pivots been. Now seeing other judges from other jurisdictions come out and state that, hey, public nuisance, you're not going to get it, right? You're not going to get what you are hoping for, and just kind of what is the thinking as well, because it's not only shareholders, but it's also taxpayers, and they're the biggest shareholders. So you're really doing a double job, right? Because if you're both a shareholder and a taxpayer, you're really a shareholder twice, right?
Right. And while they argue, people still drug overdose deaths are still rising.
Exactly, and that's where I was kind of going, because as a taxpayer, and when you're a state AG, you are still responsible for taxpayer allocation. That's still funds that taxpayer is spending in order for you to go after certain what you deem as criminals, right? Certain activities, and say we're going to target certain policies, we're going to target certain entities because we believe that these entities have been doing our taxpayers wrong, or that taxpayers have suffered some unjust or undue consequence. But let's be very clear that it's taxpayers that fund that effort. It's taxpayers that pay the AG's salary. 100% of the salary comes from taxpayers. But equally, AG Ford is also a taxpayer, right? Like, it doesn't absolve him from kind of both sides of the mechanism of being the tax payer, and also the one that gets to decide where that allocation is being the most impactful, right? And is there, so I would just be interested to, just to kind of hear what AG4's thinking is behind that. Have they made any pivots? Is that something that they even consider when they're going after these cases? So yeah, it would be, it would be great to be able to, just kind of hear his thoughts. Like I said, even though we may disagree on a few points, but I think the thing that we can agree on is that this has to be about public policy. It can only be about public policy in the prevention and treatment of this opioid crisis. So I think we want to see the same means, like the same end, but how we get there, we may differ. And I think that's okay, right? That we should be able to differ, right? That's kind of what makes for not just good debate, but even good public policy, is incorporating different experiences and the impact on the legal infrastructure as well. So, I definitely will welcome AG Ford's presence. Hopefully, if he listens, even if you hate watching, brother, you're more than welcome.
Well, again,
you're welcome guest on, and definitely give you a platform to be able to say your piece, and even criticize. Even if you think we suck, listen, we open up the platform for you to be able to say, like, yeah, y'all suck, man.
well, if you have two people who always agree, one of them's not necessary.
Right.
But at the end of the day, it's for the public. That way, he's not speaking in a vacuum, and we're not speaking in a vacuum. I think a lot of times when you go onto the corporate media, with the CNN, MSNBC, so on, so you're speaking in a vacuum because everybody's always agreeing.
Right.
The public's not hearing the other side, and the other side is coming from California, Connecticut, North Dakota, Judge Polster, who told us 2 years ago to negotiate this, and also from Judge Drain, who ruled over who presided over the Purdue bankruptcy. He said this is value destroying litigation. So that's Trump and the GE. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you in a couple weeks. Thank you.